Anthony Grassi here for D2 Ticker at the NCAA Convention. Happy to sit down today with the Vice President of Division II and Liaison to the Board of Governors, Terri, Steeb, Gronau. Terri, thank you for sitting down with me today.
Thank you. Great to be with you today.
So we'll start the same way we did last NCAA Convention. I was very broad. How would you describe the state of Division II?
I think we're in a good place. I think, as you know, in Division I, they're moving towards the settlement with hopeful approval in April. I think that was a lot of question marks for Division II when we were here a year ago at the convention. Now that we have a little bit more clarity, a path forward, I think that has helped our Division II members probably breathe a little bit better, knowing that there could be some finality to the settlement come April with Division I doing its planning and organizing. As you know, Division II is in the middle of a strategic planning process, and one of the things that we've heard from our members is that the timing of this is happening at a good time because it's allowing Division II to be able to refocus in on its priorities and initiatives versus always sort of worrying what's going to happen in Division I, what's going to be the trickle-down effect. We're never going to not have a pulse on what's happening across the association, but with the potential settlement, it really has allowed Division II to take a breath and think about what makes sense for Division II and continue Division II planning.
And when you guys have figured out those strategic priorities for Division II is in September. You guys conducted a think tank, came up with a handful of priorities, both top, kind of top priorities and then some secondary priorities. What has been your feedback on those, and were there maybe some priorities that you thought were maybe either missing or in different spots than you thought the membership or the think tank group had them?
So I wasn't necessarily overall surprised by anything that was discussed because our committee structure had started to do some work in the spring and summer, but this was a helpful opportunity to bring a representative from every conference. Not all of them served in the committee structure, so it was new voices, new ideas. Our conference commissioners spent some time over the summer last year thinking through what they felt like were important strategic priorities, initiatives for the division. All of that was brought forward in September. I think what was helpful is that we were able to have the group start to prioritize those things that we need to do probably sooner rather than later. I think everything that came out of the think tank is on the table for continued debate, discussion, and potentially in the Division II strategic plan, but the think tank, I think, really helped to prioritize those areas. We have heard from our membership and particularly from our student athletes about the championship experience and that we need to continue to focus in on that to make it an important experience that student athletes are going to remember as part of their collegiate experience. So that definitely was top of mind for our think tank members and what we continually hear from the membership. So that wasn't surprising, but again, helping to prioritize where we want to go. And then I think student athlete experience, mental health, and just health and wellness, not only for student athletes, but for coaches and administrators, were other key topics that came forward. And I think people have a good belief and understanding of the Division II philosophy, but are there ways that we can potentially modernize that as we go into 2025 and beyond of where we want to go as a division within college sports, but within also higher education.
I know you guys are in the process of sending out or going to send out some member surveys regarding those priorities and kind of the feedback that the think tank put out. Thus far, obviously between September and now, have you received any feedback or heard any feedback, internal or external, on, hey, I think these are right, hey, maybe, my opinion, I think this should be in this spot or this should be a little lower, whatever priorities maybe?
So we had a chance through the fall to share the think tank report with a whole host of groups, and a lot of favorable input that says, yep, these are the right priorities and this is where we should be focusing our efforts. Here at this convention, we've got a meeting on Thursday with Division II presidents and chancellors are here, and I'm thankful there are 4 presidents and chancellors that were at the think tank that are going to be here at the convention. So they're going to do a panel presentation and then get information from their colleagues and feedback from their colleagues from the presidential level if they feel like we're potentially missing anything or if we're sort of where we need to be. I think the one thing we're hearing is, do we need to put more attention to is NIL. It's so new in Division II, and I say new in that it doesn't get the same sort of headlines that you see in Division I. And so I think Division II student athletes are still figuring it out. Schools are still figuring it out. We do a lot of education sessions, not only here, but NACDA has done a lot for its members to help, I think, individuals really understand what that means in Division II. So where that fits in our strategic plan, not necessarily sure, or how it could be a strategic priority for the division. But thanks for mentioning the survey, because it will go out next week to pretty much anybody in Division II on a Division II campus or in a conference office can provide their input and feedback. And when people get it, it is long. It is long. It's very thorough. However, it's on all of these issues that we've been talking around: championships, mental health, mental wellness. Where do we want to put our dollars? How do we want to continue to fund strategic priorities, and what should those priorities be? So this is the chance for the membership to really have a voice and to potentially hear from those that maybe haven't been as heavily involved in the process the last year.
Yeah, maybe some people that haven't been involved on committees, they have their input to help set the strategic plan as you kind of are in this very pivotal time.
Absolutely. And this is a great time for coaches, because we have a great program, Coaches Connection, where we're able to get feedback from our coaches groups. But this gives us even a broader scale of coaches, and they've always done a great job in responding to the survey when we've done it in the past. And it's so helpful to hear their feedback and input. So I'm looking forward to sort of their thoughts and opinions as well.
Absolutely. So Friday business session. We've got 6 proposals on the board, or 8,
yeah.
8 proposals on the board. Do you have any feeling, as we sit here right now, on where those may be? Obviously, there's nothing, I guess, monumental. We're not changing the entire Constitution or anything crazy like that. But we have football automatic qualifiers. We've got 2 different ones about, kind of initial eligibility, participation. Do you have any sense of where the membership sits on some of those as we sit here right now?
Yeah, I think if people were to vote today, everything will pass. All 8 proposals will pass. Some might be a little bit closer than others, the AQ proposal being, the AQ proposal for football being one of them. But overall, I think all the pieces of legislation are going to pass. And I think the most exciting thing, though, probably not the most controversial, is the ability that we're going to have our 91st championship with women's wrestling, where all 3 divisions are going to act on that this week. It's our very first proposal for Division II, so the votes we're seeing right now, it's going to pass overwhelmingly, which is exciting for the association. Very
exciting. I'm curious what the topics will be, or maybe the areas of focus will be as you meet with different committees around here about the issues that are affecting Division II institutions.
Yeah, so championships is a part of it. We're looking at, do we go to a solely metric-based system for selections? Would that allow for greater transparency, people really understanding sort of where they rank going into the overall final selection? So that's going to continue to be a debated topic. Once we do selections, how do we bracket? Is it more important to no longer have first-round conference matchups? Is it better to have schools playing closer to their home campus so you can get a better crowd? We're going to ask a lot of those questions, not only this next couple of days, but also in that membership survey, to really see where the membership feels that if you were to bracket what's most important to you, and then we can work from there after the selections are done. We're going to continue to talk about sports wagering. As you know, that's President Baker has talked about that. It's an important issue across all 3 divisions. All 3 divisions are having conversations with their student athlete advisory committees, as well as their other governance leadership groups around sports wagering and the recent data that's coming out. So I think those are going to be good conversations over the next couple of days. The settlement continues to be a topic of conversation. Yeah. People ask, what does this mean for Division II? Sort of where are we with it being January? Hopeful final approval coming in April. So what does this really mean from January to April? What's happening in Division I as they're working through their issues this week as well?
You mentioned the sports gambling piece. Obviously, as you see it right now, the NCAA just released the latest survey. I'm curious what your response to the results were for Division II student athletes and their behaviors, and maybe how does that impact, or in your opinion, how does that impact where the regulation or deregulation should maybe lean?
Yeah, so I think sometimes for a D2 student athlete, they feel like, well, I'm only betting on the Division I Final Four, or I'm only betting on the Super Bowl. So that doesn't necessarily impact my division, my school, the sport that I'm playing, so this should be okay. Well, we all know that it's not, but I think more education about what is permissible, what is not permissible. We also want to focus more in on harm reduction, because we don't want to have a student athlete who is potentially has a gambling misuse problem. How do we help them? So it's more about helping student athletes understand the potential ramifications of consistent gambling. What does that really mean? And how can we help the student athletes? That to me is more important than maybe ultimately where we end up from a legislative standpoint. I think all we want to do is make sure we're protecting the integrity of the game, but also making sure our student athletes are safe and healthy and really understand what could happen if they run into problem gambling.
Absolutely. As you think about selections, as you mentioned, that's a big piece of this. You're seeing your peers in Division III have done the same thing. I'm curious how much kind of the conversation between the two has been had with both you and Louise at the within the NCAA staff, but also how much does that and their rollout impact and influence how you think about Division II implementing the same thing?
Yeah, so
and maybe also what the actual system they use is. Obviously, they're using the NCAA Power Index. There's a conversation about KPI being that metric for Division II. How does that all kind of play?
Yeah, all good questions. So Louise and I throughout the fall would always be in contact, like, how's it going? What are you hearing from your membership? How's it going with your sport committees? And then once all of the fall selections happened in Division III, the Division III championship administrators were able to spend time with our Division II committee for championships and sort of talk through, like, here's what we learned. Here are the things that went well. Here are some things that maybe didn't go as well. Here are some things that we're changing for even the winter and the spring as it relates to how we're now doing this metric-based system. So it's been, I think, helpful from a learning perspective. Just recently, our championships committee has leaned more towards the NPI, which is the same selection criteria that Division III is using. We're now going to send that into our sport committees and allow our sports committees to really understand what it means. How is it different than KPI? How is it different than maybe some of the other selection criteria that they're doing now? And allow the sport committees over the next really 3 to 4 months have those conversations and then provide that feedback to the championships committee. And so when the championships committee gets together this summer, they can sort of understand, okay, well, here's how our sport committees feel. What does this mean for Division II? And I think the other thing they're asking is, so how long do you need to know before a change happens? Whether it's from a scheduling standpoint or how sport committees might be looking at information, like when do we do that? So at the earliest, it would be fall of 26,
okay.
Because I don't think there's any way to put anything in place for 25, 26, and you certainly don't want to have your fall sports different than your winter or your spring. So I think the earliest would be fall of 26, and we're going to gather some feedback from the sport committees to say, does that really make sense?
That was going to be my next question, is when you're going to roll this thing out, because I know that was a topic of conversation amongst the Division III folks as well.
Yes. So that's hopeful. Like, if depending on what the feedback is, I think we're all hopeful potentially fall of 26.
Is the process and the decision between KPI and NPI, I imagine that's still ongoing, but is the conversation, or the evaluation process I should say, we're going to evaluate both of these metrics. Maybe the Division III folks kind of went back a few years and looked, here's what the data said, here's what we did, here was the difference, and a lot of it was really on the margins there.
Yeah.
And see which one kind of fits what we do best, or is it we're going to evaluate the systems as they are, make a decision, and then we'll kind of run back the data and say, here's what the past would have been if we did, last 3 years would have been if we ran NPI with it, and here would have been the differences to educate the membership?
Yeah,
which approach is it?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
One, it's for people to understand, like, what are all the criteria within KPI, because people some sports are used to that one right now. Here's all the criteria in NPI. Here's how they're different or similar. and allow sport committees just to understand that piece of it. But similar to what Division III did, the Division II Championships Committee did the same thing. So they looked back at past sports and past selections, and that if you were to do it with KPI, here's what it would be. If you did it with NPI, here it would be. And the results were very similar to what you said for Division III, that it's really on the cusp. But ultimately, the teams that were ultimately selected would have been the same, regardless of which metric you used. So now it's down to, I need to understand what is in both of them, and then decide which one makes the most sense for the division.
Yeah, that's a much different education process, trying to educate everybody on what this advanced analytic metric is,
exactly,
to come up with one number that ultimately decides whether you're in or you're out.
Yep, exactly.
So I want to transition a little bit. We'll talk some finances. So this past year, the Strategic Planning and Finance Committee decided to kind of increase per diem. Number was $1.6 million, given the overall cost implications nationwide and basically every sector that have gone up. That'll gradually increase over the next few years. Is there a concern that gradual increase will keep pace with the general macroeconomic trends?
Well, it's a good question. We are asking a lot of those questions in our survey about where do finances go, and if you were to rank your championship expenses, where does per diem rank with increasing brackets or increasing travel party sizes and those types of things. Right now, in our forecast that we're using, the goal is to do a $10 increase every single year. For per diem, and we'll have to find out from the membership if they feel like that is keeping pace or not keeping pace. The other thing that they're looking at is high cost cities per diem, which is a formula that our finance and accounting staff at the office has put together for us. Division I uses it, 2 and 3 have not yet adopted that, so that might be another area where we might be able to provide some relief to Division II schools if they go to a high-cost city and the per diem just isn't making it work.
Absolutely, yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as we sit here right now, the reserve that the DTU has and where maybe some priorities are for allocating some of those resources, maybe above and beyond what the reserve threshold is right now.
Yeah, so great question. I'm going to keep going back to our survey because we're trying to collect a lot of data.
So everybody's watching, they need to fill the survey out,
yes. please. But it's important to know what our membership believes where those dollars should go. Does it need to be in revenue distribution, which is direct distributions back to schools and conferences? Do they want to see more of it put into championships? Do they want to see more of it put into student athlete initiatives like mental health training, wellness training, nutrition training, all those types of things? So we're going to look to see where our membership wants those dollars to go. I 100% believe we are going to continue to fund our championships at the level we're funding them now, if not more, because we have heard that that's an important part of the Division II experience. But if not more, what is that more, and what ultimately is that allocation going to be, will be an important topic of conversation over the next year.
One of the big initiatives heading in 2025 is the Make It Yours brand initiative, or brand activation, I should say. What does that rollout look like? What are some of the elements of that?
A great question. So we just launched our initiative last week. So we are right now have ads bought on various social media platforms pushing the Division II message. And the message that we're using is win in every arena, where you can have this balanced experience in Division II from both athletics, academics, community engagement, what you want to do in your social life on campus. And it's about, this is a choice of experience that you want to have at a Division II institution, and that's the type of experience you're going to be provided. So we're doing some ad buys right now that's going to run through the middle of March. So we're looking forward to seeing what sort of pull through we get, what kind of reaction we're getting, and it's on a whole lot of social media platforms where not only prospects are, but where parents and their influencers are, because we all know a parent's probably on Facebook, a prospect probably is not.
Probably not.
So we've got to be able to hit our audiences where they're watching. So I'm really excited to see what our results are going to be through March.
Awesome. I'll get you out in these last two bigger questions. First would be the impact of the fan database. Obviously, that was a big focus of the last State of College Sports address from Charlie Baker, and we haven't heard this one yet, but I imagine it will be. I'm curious what the impact has been for Division II over the last calendar year.
So I think if you've ever heard Charlie talk about the fan database, he calls it like the Star Wars Death Star. Like you have to kind of build it and then sort of understand what it might be capable of. So they're still in the midst of building it, but they continue to get more and more people into the fan database. What I'm hopeful is that it might be spring or it might be our fall championships next year, where we're able to now use individuals in that database to really start pushing some Division II messaging about where our championships are. So those that are just maybe a fan of that sport will have an opportunity to come see our D2 championship. So I think more to come, but I do think I'm really hopeful from a Division II standpoint what it's going to be able to do.
Absolutely. We look forward to seeing how that works for Division II. I'll get you on this last big question. I'm curious how you think about leading a membership-driven organization in your current role.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I take with a lot of honor. So in Division II, it's definitely sort of a lead-serve model where there are things that I think our membership expects me to do, to be tracking on, not only from a Division II standpoint, but from an association-wide and other two-division standpoint. But at the end of the day, our membership are the ones that need to be making the decisions. They need to be helping to set the direction. We're just providing them the tools and resources to be able to do that. And the most important thing is that we are communicating and understanding that the communication or information that a student athlete needs is going to be different than a president or chancellor, and it's our job and role to figure out what do they need in order to understand and then ultimately make a decision that they're going to be able to need to make. So I always tell people, I'm like, my role is to try and see what life looks like 2 years from now, build stuff back for you so that you're able to understand what's coming and then give them the right tools and resources to be able to make the decisions.
Excellent. Terri, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much.